Okay. Hello? Hello? So, I have the pleasure to welcome Angela McRobbie, who's facilitating this paper session today. And hello everybody also online. Angela McRobbie is Emeritus Professor at Goldsmiths University of London. From the mid-70s, when she studied under Stuart Hall at the Birmingham University Centre for Contemporary Cultural Studies, she has undertaken research on girls' magazines, youth cultures, gender, sexuality, feminism, theory and work and employment in the creative industry. And a good deal also of her work is translated in German and took place also here in Berlin. And she is currently completing a book about Berlin artist and filmmaker Ulrike Ottinger. And this will be published next year.
Yeah, it's finished actually.
Yeah. You live here in Berlin and London, and you will guide through this amazing program now. Thank you so much, Angela.
Thank you. Let me just... Well, hi everybody. I don't know, do I need this or can we speak without it? Maybe I hold on to it. Hi everybody, yes, I'm Angela and I'm very delighted to be here. And in fact, you know, I'm somebody that's always been involved in the politics of fashion, and particularly fashion from the point of view of labor, design labor, working conditions in the fashion design sector. So my specialism has always been independent, small scale, micro enterprises, most recently London, Berlin, and Milan. And this actually was the last book that I completed just a few months ago with my co-authors, one from Goldsmiths and the other from Warwick, and it's titled Fashion as Creative Economy. Here today, this conference, I think, marks a really important moment because, as I was saying, I think to a couple of speakers beforehand, during the pandemic, myself and a couple of colleagues in London, Agnes Rocamora from the London College of Fashion and Jo Entwistle from King's College, we felt that there was a need to really have a wider inter-university set of conversations about the changes that were sweeping through the fashion sector. And we also felt that fashion education was a pivotal place for discussing those changes, uninhibited by the demands of corporate life and the commercial sector, that we still have these semi-independent spaces where we can think and try out ideas and be controversial and think about things that perhaps it's much more difficult to think about if one is actually in the 9-to-5 world. Of course, the 9-to-5 world must have also those kind of connections and discussions with the universities. But you know, one of the great things about fashion pedagogy and fashion education is that it has always been so positive and interested in working lives outside the ivory tower. And I think this really, in itself, says so much about how important the work that people are doing inside the fashion academies right now. They're really at the forefront of thinking through the politics of sustainability, also of fashion tech, but likewise of fashion and science and fashion and technology. And this seems to me to be like really one of the cutting edge issues of our time. And I think that's really what we're going to be discussing here today. So I'm delighted to be here, and I'm going to introduce the first speakers. Apologies again for the delay, but everybody will stick to time to about 18 minutes per speaker, and that will still give us an hour for discussion. So without any more ado, I'm going to introduce our first speakers, who are Luciana Scruccian and Ben Barry, both from Parsons, New York. and their topic is Intersectional Praxis for Fashion Education, Navigating the Complexity of Institutional Change. So I'm delighted to meet both of you. I've met Barry online before, but I haven't met Luciana, so thank you very much.
Okay, hello everyone. So at Parsons over the past few years, we've been on a journey to structurally reorient our curriculum and culture and to truly ground this in intersectionality. And so today what we're going to share with you is a little bit about our strategies of how we've worked to embark on this change at Parsons School of Fashion, or what we refer to as SOF. So as many of you probably know, intersectionality is a framework that was developed by Black feminists and coined by scholar activist Kimberly Crenshaw. And it reveals how our experiences of race, class, gender, and other identities are entangled and shaped by dehumanizing histories and ideologies. So American fashion education is an offshoot of what was called yesterday capital F fashion, and it's reinforced these interconnected oppressions through its curriculum and culture. And so to defashion education, we believe that it's a priority to ground the work of intersectionality, because defashioning can only be achieved by centering the needs of the most excluded members of fashion education. And so we're going to share how intersectionality has guided our work across 4 key areas: strategic visioning, teaching and learning, student and alumni access, and lastly, faculty recruitment. And we're also going to share how we've experienced challenges doing this work, particularly in the ways it's been shaped by the legacy of fashion education and the context of being at a predominantly white private university in New York City. So we're primarily going to focus on our work as Dean and Associate Dean of SOF between July 2021 and June 2023. And this is the start date of when I moved to Parsons and began my term as Dean, and it's the end date when Luciana completed her term as the Associate Dean. So of course the work we're going to discuss represents only one moment in time, and we recognize that our colleagues, past and present at SOF, have advanced social justice, and that this is truly an ongoing journey. But I think what's unique about some of the work we're going to share is the way that it's really been grounded in structural change and a commitment from the SOF Dean's Office, rather than only the dedication of a small group of faculty. But of course, the work we're presenting is not our work alone, it's the work of our entire community of faculty, staff, and students. So Parsons is home to the oldest fashion design degree in the US. SOF has 6 programs at undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate levels in the areas of fashion design, fashion management, textiles, and fashion communication and marketing. So our programs are consistently ranked globally, and our alumni include renowned designers: Willie Smith, Anna Sui, Tom Ford, Marc Jacobs, only to name a few. So SOF has long been driven by a vision of delivering excellent fashion education. But of course, it's important to question, what does excellent fashion education mean? And in the summer of 2020, the failures of fashion education across the global north were amplified during the Black Lives Matter protests against the murder of George Floyd. And at SOF, our community questioned the excellence of our fashion education because of the ways our curriculum and culture had reinforced anti-Black racism and social injustice overall. And so in September 2021, we began a project called Vision SOF. And this was a year-long process to create a collective vision for SOF through collaboration with all members of our community. And the context of this work actually began a year before by our school curriculum committee that developed a school-wide equity, inclusion, and social justice statement. And the statement acknowledged the school's long history and ongoing practices of exclusion and committed to remedy them both in and out of the classroom. So Vision SOF was launched with a message for the entire community. Let me go back to the slide before. And I just want to highlight some of the language used to introduce this project that's on the slide here. That there's been a deep questioning of how our field reinforces continuing legacies of settler colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade. And there's a deep desire to create an educational culture that readdresses this harm. And I think there's 2 points of this that I really want to call out. One, that the message recognizes the historic nature of injustice and their specific roots on the land in which Parsons is located. So the attempted cultural genocide of Indigenous people and the enslavement of Black people. And 2, the message recognizes that the goal of the vision work is to readdress this harm and injustice. You can move to the next slide. So we created a working group made up of students from each of the 6 programs, staff, full-time faculty, and part-time faculty. And the group, part of their main work was to lead out a survey with our community to understand how they want the school's vision to be defined. And we were committed in this work to centering the needs and the experiences of those in our community that had been excluded. But there was complexity in doing this work because there's a perception that many students in our community have significant privilege, the result of being at a costly, tuition-dependent university in an expensive city. And moreover, many of our full-time faculty base are predominantly white, presenting, access privileged, and learned about fashion in traditional educational cultures. So we kept this in mind as we drafted our survey questions, and we partnered with various university stakeholders. But some of the stakeholders raised concerns that if survey questions too much focused on amplifying experiences of marginalization, that could alienate valuable members of our community. And so we ended up creating survey questions that maybe were less politically charged, some here shown on the slide, but we hope that the framing of Vision SOF would guide responses and also show marginalized community members our commitment to them. So on September 2020, we launched the vision and values for SOF, which grounded access and justice as the standard of fashion education, really centering the needs of the most marginalized members of our community. Of course, we recognize this vision is aspirational. It articulates who we want to be, but it also helps us focus our concrete efforts to transform our curriculum and culture.
And as we move to practice and implement SOF values in teaching and learning for the SOF community, we see culture shifts in the context of teaching and learning, action, and transform through collaborative and collective conversation. Within a space of activation of voices and perspectives, contributing to the implementation of SOF values becomes realized. We have approached this work through one of SOF's principal committees, as has been mentioned, the School of Fashion Curriculum Committee, whose charge is with curricular initiatives and implementation, with membership composition inclusive of representation from across our School of Fashion community and stakeholders comprising of part-time and full-time faculty colleagues, administrative team members, and we have also had the guidance of a student member as well for a year to support this work and to advise. As a means of introducing and dialoguing about Vision SOF in the scope of work and roadmap through the lens of decolonization, community, accountability, belonging, and equity to the wider School of Fashion community, we held 2 fora in the format of town halls. One last fall 2022, as been mentioned with the launch of the SOF values, and one this past spring where we had conversations about the implementation of. We opened up these conversations by acknowledging and thanking faculty for their deep commitment and the investment that they're already doing to center our students. We found these forums being in community with colleagues, sharing diverse perspectives and entry points, invaluable and generative, prompting questions and discussion of how SOF values currently come to life within their individual courses and teaching practice, or how faculty may envision them coming to life in their courses and teaching practice, or where to begin integrating the SOF values into their teaching practice, and by which means of support and resources will be needed to do so. Some of the key takeaways from these collective conversations illuminated core curriculum concerns brought forth by students across the various classes. As we know, as educators, we hear students who speak to us directly as mentorship or just chatter amongst themselves. In that, the representation of social justice from the perspective of students still does not fully meet their expectations and does not take into consideration their lived experiences, from pedagogy to course outcomes. Some perspectives shared within the context of the space were that these issues and concerns are rooted in a legacy of Parsons fashion curriculum delivery. Also illuminated from a faculty perspective in these conversations was their lived experience, the faculty's lived experience, and realities of implementing and navigating curricular aspects of social justice, aligning with SOF values within a classroom context of faculty to student engagement, peer-to-peer to student engagement, in addition to engagement with guest lecturers or speakers within a context of their class, and those types of conversations and discourse. We recognize the ongoing work necessary to support this transformation in this space. Part of the roadmap for this ongoing work is the importance to center and ground the work with strategies paired with tangible approaches and tools and resources. With that, over the course of the past few years, we have engaged external and internal facilitators to lead the SOF community in conversations through EISJ workshops and pedagogy and curriculum faculty development workshops to help support faculty in teaching, implementing, and having compassionate in-class critique and dialogue around the School of Fashion values and the context of social justice and how it's situated in fashion practice. In addition, these types of engagements supported our responding to and being proactive to support the amplification of our marginalized students' voices within a context of our teaching and learning environment, as I alluded to a little bit ago. We approach these collaborative learning spaces, faculty development workshops through the lens of empathy, recognizing that the various entry points and investment from our community members. And some of the highlights of the workshops that we've held, which has been several, but a few highlights are, a couple are, racist classism, everyday racist habits of thinking, driving mass injustices that impact the Black student experience. And within the space of faculty development, designing for bodies, an inclusive approach for all shapes and sizes. Through the scope of our work, we have placed no assumptions on the level of engagements throughout our processes. However, we continue to learn the complexities of navigating conversations within the space of multiple perspectives and diverse educational understanding of privilege in the lens of faculty lived experiences and that of students' intersectionality as they progress in their journey alongside societal contexts impacting their lived experiences. In further support of student voices, calling out deficiencies in our core curriculum around fashion and social justice issues, the School of Fashion has presented an opportunity for elective course proposals with language and the call to center knowledges not previously recognized or with a focal point in the core curriculum. This call was well received across our part-time and full-time faculty colleagues, and some of the new relevant electives culminated in courses such as Fat Fashion, Embodiment of Justice, Contemporary Indigenous Fashion, and African American Women's Subsistence and Blackness Through Dress. Our continued work in aligning School of Fashion values of belonging and equity is situated in the space across our student and alumni. We find that there is a perception that Ben mentioned earlier, a privilege about the students that can attend Parsons School of Fashion, and that the School of Fashion has unlimited resources. This perception of privilege and inequity manifests through pedagogy, assessment, rubrics, deadlines, and flexibility. These challenges have progressed throughout the students' journey, throughout their graduation and completion. And in some of the context of this manifestation is realized in a classroom and course outcomes. Some of it is realized in the labor that students spend outside of class time to be able to afford to attend Parsons School of Fashion, the resources and supplies. And some of it manifests in students' commitment with commute times, not being able to afford to live in a context local enough to the city, whereas the various events and engagements that we have on campus, they're not able to attend for various reasons of scheduling and their proximity to campus. Here we share a prevalent quote from a recent School of Fashion graduates, and it's on the slide, but I will read it out. I and many other Black students at Parsons have consistently had to create work with little to no funding while also competing to produce the same quality of work as our wealthier white Asian students. While we have and will continue to provide support for students through material donations and sponsorships as some of the avenues, we know that there is still work to be done to address these systemic issues, which are both material and immaterial. The SOF values prepare students as thought leaders and connectors. However, we know and recognize that fashion in many ways is still an exclusionary practice and an industry. From a capacity standpoint, there has been a challenge from SOF capacity to activate some of our initiatives. In some cases, labor falls on already fully engaged faculty, and in particular, the very few faculty from these groups and communities who take on work in addition to their roles as teachers, researchers, and academic leadership.
So one of our goals has been to intentionally diversify our full-time faculty base, and we've launched full-time faculty cluster hires in the area of fashion and social justice, specifically focused on fashion design as well as fashion management. And as a result of these searches and our collective searches over the past 2 years, we've been able to hire 10 new full-time faculty, 9 of whom are Indigenous, Black, Latinx, South Asian, and East Asian women who have a range of other embodied experiences that have been excluded from fashion education. So hiring faculty who have been who in critical mass, who've been traditionally excluded from fashion education, provides experience, knowledge, and capacity to support what Luci just talked about, student mentorship and curriculum development. And I want to describe how we created intentional job postings to recruit candidates who have been excluded from full-time faculty positions with an example from our fashion management search. So on this slide here is an excerpt from our 2020 posting for an assistant professor of fashion management. And as you can tell, the posting doesn't intentionally call out knowledges or experiences that haven't been included in fashion educational cultures. So in contrast, our school vision then shaped the very position title for our 2022 job ad for assistant professors of fashion management and social justice. And as you can tell by the language, we specifically looked for fashion management experience in relation to racial justice and/or Indigenous resurgence, plus size, disability, and/or LGBTQS plus communities. And I think what was unique about these job postings is we really centered an intersectional perspective through the qualifications that were required from candidates. So first, the posting allowed for equivalence to a university degree that could come from engagement in fashion practice, in entrepreneurship, or in community work. And this really eliminated qualification barriers to full-time faculty positions that often prevent the hiring of marginalized candidates or favor what's called the super token. Dory Tunstall defines a super token as an individual from a marginalized group or groups whose talents are so desired by institutions that they're able to overcome their innate aversion to the individual's identities in order to have access to their talents. Tunstall notes that while a super token might originally break down barriers, they can also be used to create new barriers because their accomplishments are so rare. So second, our posting asks candidates to demonstrate how their practice shows a commitment to intersectional Indigenous, Black, and/or people of color communities. And so the statement intentionally valued the experiences that come from being embedded in multiply marginalized communities through practice. But I'll say that this language was a compromise. In the first draft and at the very top of our job posting, we originally stated that preference would be given to candidates from Indigenous, Black, and people of color communities to readdress the ongoing exclusion of these faculty from fashion education. However, New York state law considers giving preference to candidates based on identity to be discriminatory, even if the very intention of doing so is to redress ongoing discrimination. So we then tried to suggest different language that candidates should demonstrate how their lived experience shows a commitment to multiply marginalized communities. Again, this was rejected. It was seen again that it might suggest a preference be given to candidates based on identity. And so after much back and forth with our university partners, we came to this compromise. It was a statement that wasn't as politically intentional as we would have wanted, but it certainly supported and aligned with a risk-averse private university in a US context that doesn't legally allow us to redress ongoing historic exclusion.
So without question, enacting change at an institutional level is labor. We conclude with another quote for Dory Tunstall, who speaks to the personal impact of this work, and in particular, the differing personal impacts based on our positionality. No one tells you how painful this work is. To describe it, especially to all of you Indigenous, Black, Latinx, Asian, and Middle Eastern people who have been put in these positions to bring about diversity, inclusion, equity, decolonization. It means taking the blows of the institution, showing them the blood and how much it hurts, and then helping the institution to heal and change in systems causing pain. We thank you.
Really excited to share with you our research project, which is a cross-institutional exploration of student expectations of sustainability in the fashion curriculum. So we're going to start off just by introducing ourselves briefly. So I'm a fashion design educator with over a decade of professional practice in Europe, and I've lived and taught internationally. My focus is on fashion design for sustainability, and I always encourage my students to reimagine the future of fashion design.
And I'm a fashion educator in design and fashion business. And my teaching philosophy is deeply influenced by my experience as designer, product developer, and startup consultant across Europe, the Middle East, and now Asia. And my research and teaching aim is to create alternative approaches that encourage sustainable consumption habits and innovative enterprise solutions that ultimately support a transition towards more conscious and responsible practices in the industry.
And so to introduce our project, both myself and Corinna have taught with a focus on sustainability for over 10 years, and we've both taught internationally at a variety of higher education institutions. And throughout this time, we've had this dialogue around our experiences, and we've noticed anecdotally a kind of shift in students' perceptions of sustainability. So where 10 years ago they questioned why they were learning about it, now they seem to expect it as part of the core curriculum. And this mindset shift is certainly reflected in the ongoing youth-led climate protests, which are occupying schools and universities across Europe. Now, further, more recently, we've had this really interesting dialogue because of where we're now based. So Corinna is based in Vietnam, and UNICEF identifies Vietnam as one of the world's most vulnerable countries to climate change, while it is also a leading fashion producer. And in contrast, the UK is one of the largest fashion consumers globally and a high contributor to greenhouse gas emissions driving climate change. And so in our shared dialogue, we had this realization that we didn't necessarily truly know what it was that our students have learnt so far about sustainability and what they might want to learn more about. And so to have this truly student-centred approach, this is why we decided to run this project. And we wanted to gather our students' perceptions at both universities we're working at, and then underpin those with our shared teaching experience at DIDI in Dubai. So just a little of the literature that we looked at to inform this project. So we know that a huge amount of valuable work has been done around embedding sustainability into design education and fashion education. And this has been done internationally, and this continues to grow, which is really positive. And we also found Earth Logic really valuable here, as it highlights the need for new knowledge and mindsets for fashion designers. Petty's notion of teaching as a two-way process has also been very valuable to our thinking. And for example, John Dewey's ideas around developing socially responsible citizens. We also looked at a lot of co-creating and co-designing curricula literature, especially as students have direct and recent experience as learners, which is something that staff often lack. And again, this connected back with Earth Logic, which speaks about co-learning, learning together, as a tool to challenge a growth-centric knowledge hierarchy.
And to give you a little bit about context about our institutions, the University of Portsmouth teaches a fashion textile program where both social and environmental considerations have been addressed in the design practice, as well as sustainable fashion techniques such as zero waste pattern cutting, natural dyes, digital printing have all been integrated. However, the module evaluation do not address sustainability in any of its questions. And like at UAP, the student course evaluation at RMIT Vietnam does not address sustainability explicitly, and no specific understanding of students' expectations around this has been conducted in the program before. We teach fashion enterprise, which, yes, includes sustainable design and textile techniques, however, also looks at supply chain management, marketing, and enterprise, focus on systems change and innovation.
So in terms of our methodology, we adopted a mixed methodology, and this involved an online survey that was completed by both the cohorts at University of Portsmouth and RMIT Vietnam. And then this data was thematically analysed through a collaborative process where we also added our reflections as educators in each of our institutions, but also in our work together in the UAE. I think it's important to note here that we had a few challenges because the ethics approval process was quite different at both of our institutions. And so the process at RMIT took a lot longer. So that meant that the actual data collection phase was unsynchronized between our institutions. So we're going to take a brief overview of some of the key results. So here you can see one example where we asked students about which sustainable design strategies they are familiar with. And we were really reassured, particularly to see that the students had familiarity with the key topics that are included in the curriculum. So as an example here, at the University of Portsmouth, the students were really familiar with upcycling and modular design, and they're both a big focus in our courses. And it was also interesting here to note significant differences. So for example, RMIT students seemed much more familiar with regenerative fashion than the group at the University of Portsmouth. And both groups seemed less familiar with the potential of monomaterials. We also asked students about how important they felt it was for their course to integrate sustainability. This was really positive in that the majority of students felt that it was important, and we added a follow-up question to get some more qualitative data around this topic. And so here at the University of Portsmouth, we had a student talking about how important it is to learn about sustainability because businesses are looking for this knowledge. Another student highlighted that they are concerned, though, about limitations and restrictions that may come with learning about sustainability. So that's really useful for us as educators to know. At RMIT Vietnam, they felt it was very important, and one particular participant talked about how they feel the general awareness around sustainability needs to improve, especially as the apparel industry in Vietnam is growing, and they are concerned about the impact that will have on the environment and people. We also asked students whether they feel they need to learn more about sustainability. Now, this question resulted in quite a difference in that at the University of Portsmouth, 64% said they needed to learn more, while at RMIT Vietnam, 90% said they needed to learn more. Again, we followed up with a question to find out what specifically the students wanted to learn more about. And at the University of Portsmouth, they were really interested in sourcing sustainable fabrics, learning more about zero waste and digital fashion design, and how all this relates to industry practice. And at RMIT, they were really interested in the supply chain, how it could be applied to business practices as well as design. And they were really curious about upcycling materials and techniques, and ultimately how to make it practical.
So let's move now to the insights we gained from the surveys as a whole when connected with our shared reflections from teaching in the UK and Vietnam and in Dubai. There are obvious differences in familiarity of sustainable design concepts between the two student cohorts, and that is due to the difference in the focus of the two programs. However, clearly, both surveys highlight students' commitment to addressing the fashion industry's environmental damage and the fact that sustainability is indeed in the forefront of their minds. So they are very aware of the industry's current status, which results in the urgent desire to know more about practical sustainability approaches. Additionally, half of the respondents highlighted to us with their answers that digital fashion is an underexplored opportunity, which again is very valuable to us as educators to acknowledge where we could focus our teaching on. Furthermore, as academics, we need to address which priorities in expanding students' knowledge we need to take. So seizing the opportunity to enhance practical approaches seems to be prevalent. Also emerging technologies as well as best practices in the industry, which shows us the potential and importance of further research and the value of cross-institutional and cross-continental collaborations. So we can further equip the students to be the change our industry needs now. With this, we are able to give our students agency in envisioning those sustainable fashion futures together. We also wanted to highlight some of the limitations to this study. The response rate was lower than we had hoped for. It is possible that participants that completed the survey felt more strongly about sustainability challenges and therefore making them more interested in the topic, which may impact the generalization of data to the whole cohort. We also didn't have the possibility to ask follow-up questions due to the format of the survey, which, however, opens up pathways for further and deeper research. And we also acknowledge that the study is looking at two large institutions, and there are factors outside of the course which may influence and impact the students and their opinions. However, nevertheless, the exploratory study we've conducted provides a starting point for exploring sustainability in education at UAP and RMIT Vietnam through the lens of fashion and hopefully further.
And so to conclude, these are some of the key points that we feel are important from this project and are the insights that we will be implementing into our teaching practice going forward. And so, first of all, we're both very committed to this student-centered approach, and we can really see a value in continuing with that and establishing clear learning objectives linked to sustainability, making sure that these better align with sustainability goals, and ensuring that there's a focus on solution-based teaching to enable agency. Further, we want to continue enhancing teaching practice. We want to ensure that we are implementing more student-led classes to create diverse learning moments and to embrace co-learning. We also want to make sure that there is enough training and development. So making sure that the academic team as a whole has training to ensure that all modules or units are aligned with the latest research and industry practices, and also embracing those less familiar sustainable design strategies. We also want to continue embracing new approaches, so recognizing the limitations of existing systems and processes and exploring emerging institutions for radical change in education. Further, we want to foster dialogue with students, engage in a dialogue to understand students' hesitancy in contributing to sustainability exploration, and to communicate the desire to co-create that curriculum. And we also have plans for the future. We want to continue doing annual surveys so that we can have a more longitudinal study, so we can continue to improve our understanding, but also to measure changes in student perspectives in response to curriculum developments. Thank you so much, everyone. And we would really welcome your questions, perhaps via email. And yes, please enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you for having us. And we'll both be online watching. Bye.
Yeah.
Our next speaker is Hani Chupani from Freiburg and Hanover. Welcome.
Hello. Is it working? The sound is working? Okay.
Yes.
First of all, I should mention that this is a huge research project which is being conducted in 4 years with my supervisors, Professor Dr. Annemarie Grunmeier in University of Education Freiburg, and Professor Martina Glom in University of Applied Sciences and Arts Hannover. And this is a comparison between 2 countries about the state of ESD implementation in fashion design studies in Germany and Iran. First of all, we want to know which sustainability aspects are already implemented in the academic curricula and program descriptions for fashion design, and then to what extent ESD is applied. So for this reason, we want to follow this design-based research holistic approach. And we started with a systematic literature review and curricula interpretation. And actually we start with evaluation, and we end with evaluation in the 4th year. And right now, I've conducted the very first step of the research, and the other steps are being done in the next 3 years. Well, these 2 maps are the maps of Iran and Germany. As you see, Germany is the 2nd leading fashion market in Europe, and Iran, like after 1979 Islamic Revolution, has been impacted by religious politics, to be honest. So we don't have fashion design field. We have apparel, textiles, sewing, and printing design, although we have fashion courses in the degree, but we don't name the degree fashion. So I created these maps to show the universities which are offering the degree The square is for public universities, and the circle is for the private universities. And you see, when you see the number of the universities in Iran, you can completely understand the importance of implementing sustainability in the courses. The universities we selected for Germany are the universities that offer fashion design for BA and MA. And the other universities in Iran are the public and private universities offering apparel and sewing design. Well, first of all, to interpret the curricula, I need to have a model. So I thought I can use the Hermos model, which is based on 4 parts: critical thinking, interdisciplinary learning, collaborative learning, and ecological literacy. Based on these 4 parts, I chose some keywords to interpret the curricula. These are the main keywords: environmental and economic aspects of sustainability, ethical and social action, sustainable design strategies, strategies in the textile chain, innovative knowledge, cooperation, and interdisciplinary projects, critical thinking, and in the end, socio-cultural subjects. So I looked for these keywords in the curricula of universities in the 2 countries. Well, in Iran, there is only one curricula which is published by the Ministry of Education for all universities. But unfortunately, the selected universities in Iran did neither integrate any ESD aspects. In a better word, I can say that none of the keywords could be found in the curricula of the universities in Iran. But for Germany, in the curricula, these keywords in this column was found in the curricula. So we can say that sustainability in the textile industry, for example, was defined in the curricula of one university or the other topics. And I also searched elective courses on the university's websites because curricula is not enough. We need to see what else is done. So I found on the university's websites that they are implementing some elective courses for ESD aspects, for example, greenwashing, innovative materials, or contemporary textile design, which is about sustainability in the textile chain. And in the program description, some universities were claiming that they are covering sustainability through all their degrees courses. As this is not enough, I mean the curricula interpretation, we did another research method, systematic literature review. For this, we used several databases, and we followed Paul and Criado's guidelines for conducting the systematic literature review. And first of all, we created a search term matrix. But these keywords are just examples of the keywords we used because we searched several keywords on those databases. The databases are in 2 languages, Persian for Iran's publications, and German and English for Germany and Iran's publications. And for screening the results, I used inclusion and exclusion criteria. The publications should focus on ESD implementation in Germany and Iran, and especially for higher education. So the results show that there is limited research on this topic in both countries, although Germany is far ahead, even in this part. I could find 2 projects in Germany, the Fashion Diet project, which has been conducted from 2020 and 2023, which is an online ESD module that can be used to integrate ESD into the curriculum. And the other publications were the works of Irma, which I used her model for my curricula interpretation. And for Iran, I could only find 2 papers which mentioned sustainability, and one were organizing ESD courses for apparel design students. Other than that, I could not find any publication, so this shows the necessity of implementing ESD aspects in these fields in both countries, especially in Iran. So the next step that I'm conducting right now is the interviews with professors in fashion design in both countries. I say fashion design because literally it is fashion design in Iran, but as I already mentioned, we call it apparel design. And in the end, we have also an empirical studies. Well, the very main aim of the interviews with experts is to explore the development of course implementing ESD as a guiding principle in fashion design education by examining the strategies, tools, and methods that professors are applying. For example, this is a tool that right now I am also using it somehow in courses in Hanover, and I use it here as an example to show that I want to examine different methods and the strategies of professors in Germany to evaluate them. And while doing the interviews with professors in Iran, I want to see their challenges there and their opinions, how to implement these aspects there in a different cultural context. As a summary, so far the comparison demonstrated that Germany has made progress in integrating sustainability aspects. I say progress because this research has been conducted on this topic in 2018 on the curricula of 5 universities, and at that time the results of the research show that only the University of Applied Sciences Berlin was integrating sustainability into its curriculum. I mean, it was defined formally by 2019 in Germany, but right now I saw in the curricula of all universities that some of the keywords that I was looking for were defined in the curricula. So I can say Germany has made a considerable progress in this topic, whereas Iran has yet to include sustainability aspects in its programs. But this is not enough because we don't know what is happening in the content of the classes. So, for example, there are some elective courses that professors are implementing. So they are not defined in the curricula, so we don't know what's happening in the courses. Maybe more is done or less is done. So we need to conduct expert interviews, more expert interviews, and in the next steps, which I am doing right now, is conducting the sustainable strategies at courses at University of Applied Sciences and Arts Hanover. While conducting the courses, I'm documenting them and observing them, and receiving feedback from students to evaluate the course. And after that, with all the results, I'm gonna develop a course to implement ESD as a guiding principle, and then pilot the course at the same university. And in the end, we are going to implement it in Tehran. And again, we see that it ends with evaluation. That's why we are following DBR approach. And these are the references for your, if you want to have a look. Thank you. And if you have any questions.
Okay, and then we'll have an open discussion. Thank you. That was super interesting. Magdalena Kohler from the UDK here from Berlin, working also on a research project in Chemnitz.
Can you change the presentation? Or do we have to do it here? Okay, hello everybody, and welcome you to my presentation, or our presentation, New Synergies through the Interlinking of Previously Independent University Structures. This paper presents an innovative teaching concept that aims to broaden the understanding of the textile technologies and fashion. Oh, it doesn't change the slide. Ah, yeah. Okay. To broaden the understanding of the textile technologists and fashion designers with regard to sustainable clothing. The concept promotes the cooperation between the University of Technology in Chemnitz at the TUC and the University of the Arts here in Berlin, as we are here at the UDK, representative for future collaborations between universities and of technology, science, and art, with the aim of creating a holistic understanding of design and manufacturing processes in order to redefine sustainability boundaries for the design process. The solution path includes the broadening the understanding of materials and manufacturing, teaching design methods, cooperation in collectives, overcoming bureaucratic and financial hurdles, implementing the teaching concept step by step. The trial of the project, including the planned first run and the transfer possibilities, are presented in the paper. The findings from the implementation of such a teaching concept can make a valuable contribution to the development of sustainable clothing and establish a new type of collaboration between designers and technologists. This is necessary to meet the complex challenges of design processes in a sustainable future. Through our years of teaching experience at the University of the Arts as an assistant in fashion design, and the experiences and insights I gained as a doctoral student at the University of Technology in Chemnitz, over the past 2 years, it had become increasingly clear that in order to be able to act in a truly sustainable way, we have to strengthen our existing resources and structures by sharing them. Dr. Andre Mattes from the University of Technology and I have been working on a teaching concept over the last few months that brings both departments closer together. Because despite overlaps in content within the teaching of fashion design and textile technology, there has been no direct exchange between the interdisciplinary fields so far, which I will discuss further in the paper. Andre Mattes is currently on sabbatical, so I will present the paper. But my PhD supervisor, Professor Dr. Holger Zibola, is here in the audience for further questions afterwards. Thank you for being here. In a rapidly changing society, we are facing new challenges in the fashion industry. An ever-growing segment of the population is increasingly striving for sustainable lifestyles and looking for environmentally friendly alternatives in all areas of daily life. In addition to the food sector, a shift in awareness can be observed in clothing consumption, in particular as consumers recognize the impact of the consumption behavior on the environment and working condition in the global supply chain. These social changes lead to an increasing demand for sustainable clothing and simultaneous rejection of exploitation and unfair working conditions in the third world. Consumers demand transparency and ethical standards along the entire supply chain. In addition, the fashion industry is struggling with the effects of the fast fashion phenomenon, where garments are produced and consumed in ever shorter cycles, resulting in a huge waste of resources due to more and more unsold clothing and ever shorter usage periods. In view of these developments, both fashion designers and textile technologists are facing new challenges. Fashion students often feel constrained in the design process by the mostly negative developments in the fashion industry and societal changes in the perception of fashion. They are confronted with the task of designing sustainable clothing, but without a sufficient understanding of the increasingly important sustainability aspects in the fields of ecology, sociology, and economy in relation to clothing and its manufacturing processes. On the other hand, textile technologists face the challenge of developing sustainable and design-relevant technologies, but without fully understanding the requirements and applied methods of designers. To meet these challenges and create a holistic understanding and new freedoms within the sustainability framework, close collaboration and cross-learning between textile technologists and fashion designers will be needed in the future. It is necessary for them to bring knowledge and expertise together to find innovative solutions and develop in a more sustainable clothing. At the TUC, the current focus of education is primarily on technical textiles, technologies, and technical aspects. The lectures focus on high-performance fibers, and since a few years, also on the recycling process of wool. This orientation reflects the industrial application of textiles and fulfills the requirements of a technology-oriented education. The textile technologists have a broad knowledge of technological boundaries, material and structures expertise, and a cross-process understanding of the entire textile chain, starting with the fiber and ending with the finishing processes. This knowledge enables them to understand the technological challenges of the textile industry and develop innovative solutions with a focus on function. In the design process, the focus is on a conceptual exploitation and storytelling on specific themes, as well as on the color and print design, the feel and combination of the selected materials, as well as the pattern construction and form of the garment. In the future, it will be just as important for fashion design students to include design possibilities from the area of the fibers, the yarn, and the textile surface formation in the design process in order to work out these factors more strongly from a sustainable perspective. To empower future fashion designers standing behind the design collection with full responsibility, it is essential to have a broader knowledge along the textile chain, a clear awareness of the sustainable impacts of the respective process steps, as well as an understanding of the recycling processes. Combining technical aspects with design elements enables innovative approaches of an holistic view of sustainable clothing. Furthermore, it is essential to include customer education in the design process and to raise awareness for sustainable clothing. This also includes the question of how sustainable clothing can change in use and how customers can be motivated to make a conscious choice about that. Despite overlaps in content within the teaching of fashion design and textile technology, there has been no direct exchange between the interdisciplinary fields to date, which can lead to misunderstandings and more difficult communication in later industrial practice. Designers are often seen as idea generators with concepts that are considered as difficult to implement. From the designer's point of view, textile technologists often seem reluctant to embrace new ideas that are perhaps too visionary at first. It is purposeful to eliminate these prejudices at an early stage by ensuring close networking and cooperation between the two disciplines from the very beginning. By understanding and appreciating each other's way of thinking, it is possible to work more effectively in the industry and later in the work environment by jointly driving visionary design processes. This enables a synergetic fusion of technical knowledge and creative design expertise within the degree program, leading to the development of innovative solutions and advanced sustainability in the fashion industry. While fashion designers focus on the design aspects, textile technologists focus more on the industrial implementation of design. The intertwining of the two areas can be further strengthened through joint work on sustainable projects and incorporated into ever deeper layers of textile manufacturing processes. Only through close cooperation and the exchange of knowledge and expertise can innovative solutions be found to meet the challenges of the fashion industry. Political decisions, such as an important ban on unsustainably produced clothing in Europe, could accelerate this process. Within the EU's Green Deal, we are certainly already well on the way to stronger legal regulations. Knowledge in this area will also play an increasing role for future graduates in their everyday work. The main objective of the interdisciplinary teaching concept is to create a more holistic design technological understanding in order to jointly define sustainability boundaries from this. For this, it is necessary to focus on a framework conditions for different sustainable textile production principles and to jointly approach the development of new freedoms within these framework conditions. In order to implement the innovative teaching concept between the textile technologists at the TUC and the fashion designers at the UDK, a structured process is required. First, broadening the understanding of materials and manufacturing. The starting point is the fashion design students' insufficient understanding of manufacturing processes, especially in relation to sustainable aspects. To improve this, it is important to provide students with a deeper understanding of material and manufacturing processes. This can be achieved through workshops, lectures, and practical exercises where students learn how different textiles are made and furthermore, how they can be produced and used sustainably. Second, the teaching design methods. The starting point is the insufficient understanding of textile technology students of the approach to design process and methods. In order to understand the sometimes difficult to comprehend design decisions that can potentially lead to new technological challenges, it is important to provide students with a deeper insight into the working processes of the designer. This can also be achieved through workshops, lectures, and practical exercises where students learn what the starting points, problems, and goals are in the design processes. Cooperation in collectives. In order to cover the extended expertise and share the knowledge, students from both departments should work together in pairs or groups. This enables the exchange of different perspective and expertise. The cooperation can take place both in seminars or joint project work. Overcoming bureaucratic hurdles. Cross-regional network should be created to facilitate cooperation between the two institutions. Teaching assignments, guest student programs, and exchange through cooperation agreements can promote knowledge exchange and cooperation. In addition, excursions to companies and institutions along the textile chain can be organized or should be organized to give students insights into the practice and to establish future contacts in the fashion industry. Overcoming financial hurdles. The implementation of innovative teaching concept often requires financial resources, especially for excursions and lectures from external partners. Opportunities for funding and support should be identified. This could include applying for funding for innovative teaching projects or working with companies that are interested in sustainable fashion and can support the project. as we planned the cooperation starting in the upcoming winter semester, hopefully. So in the first run of the teaching concept, the textile technologists from the TUC could spend some days at the UDK in order to contribute the knowledge of materials and their properties, as well as to expand their own understanding of design through exchange. As a follow-up, the fashion designers from the UDK could spend some days at the TUC to work together with the technologists on a sustainable framework for a selected product group in order to expand the previous intertwined knowledge. In order to further deepen the cooperation, student pairs could be formed in the following semester, consisting of a fashion design student and a textile technologist. These pairs could work together on a practical-based seminar or semester project at the UDK that deals with sustainable fashion, for example, with a focus on wool. At the same time, textile technologists from the TUC could run a seminar on sustainable fibers and textile processes in which they deal intensively with the topic of wool. As a result of a cooperation between the students, a written contribution to the joint problem could be produced by the TUC. This could deal with the technological aspects and approaches to solutions. And on the part of the UDK, a product range could be created that depicts the implementation and possible problem solutions in the field of sustainable design and transfer them into a joint collection. Both sides work on the same topic, just in another way. In order to transfer the results of the teaching concept to an industrial scale, the joint exchange of students is of great importance. The cooperation between textile technologists and fashion designers can help to ensure that the ideas and solution approaches developed can actually be implemented in practice. Through early exchange with industry partners and other relevant stakeholders, students can gain valuable insight into the feasibility of sustainable solutions. For example, the jointly developed output can be pitched as a proposed solution to the relevant companies in order to expand the ideas developed on a small scale to an industrial scale. The implementation of the teaching concept requires a clear structure, a close cooperation, and the use of resources between the two universities. Through the process, as described above, the textile technologists and the fashion design students can bring their knowledge together to develop more sustainable textile products and promote a holistic understanding of sustainability in the fashion industry. The fashion industry is faced with the task of becoming more sustainable and technologically advanced. The use of innovative technologies can reduce the negative impact of the environment and improve working conditions. Sustainability, design, and technology are not opposing concepts, rather they can act together in harmony to bring transformative change in the fashion industry. In the future, it will be up to all industry players to work transparently together and realize this vision. I would like to conclude with a quote from the book Psychology of Fashion by Caroline Meyer, which illustrates the influence and the impact of fashion very well and therefore shows how important it is to understand the value of fashion and to preserve it for our future generations. Fashion as a discipline is concerned with sensory, perception, attention, memory, creativity, and communication. As our second skin, fashion enables us to construct and express our identity. Fashion includes clothing, accessories, hairstyles, and makeup. It is the vehicle by which we promote ourselves to others. As such, it involves reasoning, decision-making, problem-solving, and social interaction. As a cultural phenomenon, fashion is concerned with meanings and symbols which provide instant visual communication. Even if we consider ourselves not interested in fashion, we all wear clothes. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Magdalena. I'd like to invite the speakers to take a seat here at the front. And that our speakers online will be able to hear us. And we're waiting for... Okay, so thank you everybody for these absolutely marvelous talks. I've been taking notes, and suddenly the enormity of the revolution that is happening in fashion education becomes incredibly tangible, and this is really so interesting. And I was just reminded that many years ago, when I did a kind of sociology of fashion that involved the art schools, a book that was called British Fashion Design, that was based in central St. Martin's. And I remember as a kind of left-wing sociologist thinking, well, the fashion schools are both snobbish and conservative, more so than many other parts of the university, including the mainstream art school departments, the fine art departments, the graphic design department. They all had a kind of celebration in Britain of a working class, black, anti-racist, but fashion kept politics at bay. And the most visible example of this was that the fashion students, who I loved working with, in many ways teaching, never wanted to or were never encouraged to visit a factory. Indeed, the word factory was rather taboo. The idea of going to look at the production processes was just not part of the syllabus. It wasn't part of the vocabulary. So what we can see today is now, that more than 20 years later, a complete transformation and real attention being paid to pedagogy, education, intersectionality, multidisciplinarity, bringing together science, technology, and fashion students. So this is so fantastic. So I think the best way to open this up now is to ask for questions to our marvelous speakers, all of whom address these questions. And if you can say your name, and if you want your institution or your company before you pose your question. So there's a question at the back.
Yes, there is one.
And if you need a microphone, please do take mine.
Thank you so much. I can come forward. Well, my question is to Ben and Luciana. First of all, thank you so much for this insightful talk, and it was a pleasure to listen to what you have achieved. But my question refers to a more alarming development in the US education, and specifically the reversal of the affirmative action. And I was wondering if you could comment on how this might affect fashion education, and if it poses the challenge to what you have achieved so far. And my name is Ira. I'm a PhD student at the University of Amsterdam. Should I give it back?
Yes. Thank you for your question. I'll start with that response, and if you would like to make an addition. I think from what Ben and I shared today, there's so much work that's happening now in the EISJ space that is long overdue. So many of my colleagues who are invested into the political landscape, alongside all of the work that we do, when we saw this coming, there was like this sort of threshold of just exhaust, right? Because we felt like we're finally at a space where we are having these collective conversations, these shared conversations of allyship and different stakeholders who are invested in moving us forward as a culture. And when you see this come down, you have an understanding that there's going to be a depletion, right? There's going to be, it's already a challenge for students to come in our space, especially as been mentioned in the scope of the new school, a predominantly white university situated in New York City, right? So we already have trust issues of students and struggles of students, as we mentioned, with various perceptions. So you see this come down with students who are coming through the K-12 system, and possibly this is more in the global north. There's going to be a concern that, again, their needs are not going to be met by either faculty that they're engaged with or respect within context of the classroom, or that when they're in the classroom presenting work, because some of the knowledge that may be alongside the affirmative action is also the critical race theory that's being taken away in many spaces, is that when they're in class, they're going to have to constantly present who they are, provide context before moving forward. So what we see this coming across is students coming in who are going to be questioning their position and dealing with and contending with the political landscape yet again, that's taking away time for them to just focus in the classroom and be mindful what's before them with everything else that's happening. We also see that in this case where we talked about monetary concerns for some students, that what affirmative action is also doing with universities in the United States now is it's going to be more challenging for a student to identify themselves as needed, for universities to understand what a student's needs might be if they're not proactive in coming forward. So we'll see it's going to manifest again in the way they progress and how they progress, because it's going to be, it's a challenge to ascertain how do we start to address it if we cannot pose or ask the question, right? And Ben, if you want to continue.
Yeah, and I think part of it now is how do we reposition language to continue to ensure that we're supporting students with access and scholarships and funding who are multiply marginalized and don't have access, but in ways that in many ways skirt around or recognize the legal context, but use other language to ensure we can still provide the necessary resources to support students. And I think part of it will really depend on what institution the fashion school is located in. I think we're fortunate to be at an institution where social justice is privileged institutionally. But I think for fashion faculty in institutions where that's not necessarily the history or mandate of the university they're in, there's going to be increasing challenges to really understand how do we still create language to ensure we're centering folks and students who have been disadvantaged, to ensure that we are redistributing power in very real ways. So I think it's going to be deep conversations with our legal department of how we create that language, but certainly within our institution, there'll continue to be that commitment and to work around the new legal context that we found ourselves in.
Other questions? I think we've got about 20 minutes. Yeah?
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, everybody, for your thank you. Hi, thank you, Angela. Thank you for really great presentations. I'm Delys Williams. I'm Centre for Sustainable Fashion based at University of the Arts in London. Sorry, I'm afraid I can't remember your name. I was trying to look up the name. Yes. Hania. I wanted to ask a question of you, actually, in relation to what you've been exploring in your work so far, the terminology around sustainability and how that is recognized through the kind of Western academic approach to reconsidering fashion education seems to be something that kind of gets foregrounded as the way to be able to recognize change. And I wonder, from your work in Iran and Germany, it's so interesting to see the different cultural considerations of, we've been talking a lot about resistance, we've been talking about using fashion as a means to question and change the context of how we live together in the world. And I wonder whether there's elements of what you have seen through the work in Iran that maybe doesn't necessarily get articulated in the ways that Western approaches to sustainability are being articulated, and whether that's something that you've seen, or whether it's something that we can know a little bit more about. I hope that's a clear conversation. I know that you could, that's quite a big
The last part
question.
was not clear.
It was just about, yeah, what have you noticed that maybe doesn't
You
get
mean the
recognised? Not the difference, just things that are coming out of a non-Western context that maybe should be part of this conversation that isn't yet.
Okay. Again, I didn't get, sorry.
Oh, the question.
Yeah.
I suppose I'm interested whether your work in Iran foreground or kind of lifts up some ideas around what it means to use dress and fashion as a way to change our understanding of equity, social justice and climate justice in ways that are not necessarily recognized in the Western context.
Yes, right now, if we want to talk about the situation right now, yes, it is being used as a way for resistance, for showing your ideas about your status in the society, to show that you are aware you are equal as a woman to men. And if you want to talk about the society, but if you want to talk about the curricula and universities, it is again under influence of politics. So everything you're doing there as like research or teaching, you can find a trace of their ideologies, the government's ideologies, and everything is being somehow observed by them. So right now, even students at universities are using fashion as a way to show their ideas, to show their oppression against how they are pushing them to live as a way that they don't want. I don't know if I get your question correctly.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure it's a difficult thing to talk about as well.
No, for me it's not difficult, but I'm not sure if I got it in a correct way, if I'm answering your question appropriately. Yes.
Actually, fashion is quite a powerful
Yes.
way in which you can resist.
Yes, right now they are more focused on how to use fashion to resist and to show that they are against what you are pushing us. So they are a bit more focused on that part than like other aspects of sustainable development, for example, materials or how you design. Yeah.
Thank you, Lilith. Are there any more questions? Yes, thank you.
Hello, I'm Harm, University of the Arts Bremen, and I wanted to ask you, because you were talking about these marginalized groups, and how do you attract them to your universities? Because that's a problem I see a lot in the universities, that there's underrepresented groups, but also in like in the cultural field and theater. And like how do you address them? Because I mean, we're doing workshops, we're going to like these two areas where there's these marginalized groups living, but besides from that, like how do you include these groups?
I mean, I think it really has to be a holistic approach by understanding, for us, it's really the multiplicity of barriers that exist. Both do students from multiply marginalized communities see themselves in our faculty, in our curriculum, in our programming? What are the financial and other costs and access barriers that are in the way because of ongoing historical injustice? So I think one, we look at cost, we look at curriculum and faculty representation, we look at sort of student groups and opportunities, and then of course when we think of access costs, we can also think of physical space. Is it an accessible space? Are we creating curriculum that supports a variety of mind bodies? Or are we having this one standardized approach to education? So part of it is really how do we one, have a deep consciousness of like where all the barriers of exclusion exist and how do we start to make an effort to dismantle those. And then part of that is really reaching out and engaging with these possible student communities, but on their own terms, right? Recognizing that for many of them, historically, they have not seen themselves in, quote, capital F fashion. They may have not seen themselves in our institutions. These might not be considered paths. And so what's our work to actually go out to communities and not just intentionally recruit, but really create this, the true narrative that like their lived experiences, their knowledges, their histories are needed in fashion, are valuable in this education space, and will be desired when they enter fashion education. So it's really bending and changing and transforming the way we've articulated recruitment, we've articulated fashion education to a much more expansive understanding where potential students can then actually see themselves and know that that knowledge and experience and history of who they are is valued and desired and will be supported once they're in once they're in our schools.
Yes, and I'll just add to that. It is, the recruitment is one aspect that been mentioned, but it really, what we've had challenges with is the retention, right? And that's some of the work that we spoke about today. It's almost a tougher bar to pass is retention, and it does deal with trust. It does deal with if we say that you can see yourselves here, you've seen student work outcomes with visibility across our programs. What spaces do we make so that they feel that they can achieve that and be supported throughout their tenure with us at the new school? I just want to just add to the previous question for us is the challenge of now recruiting students who are marginalized, identified, is compounded by the affirmative action. Just in that, you're no longer able to indicate your race or ethnicity when you're applying. So for us, again, to ensure that students who are in our community, there's a high touch point that we may have with students, but if there are students that are not, that is the challenge, right? Is to be able to then connect with a very curated information on a university, institutional, and in the systems end.
Thank you. Yes, another question?
Hi, my name is Clara Spencer. I'm from Fashion and Textiles Education Resource. I have a question for all of you more about your perspective on using material culture, and if you do that in your teaching practices at your institutions, and if that material culture is reflective of ethnographic diversity so that those students that are in your classrooms can identify with it. I'm just curious about those practices.
Can you explain again about the material practices?
Sure. So I would call clothing and textiles material culture, and within the classroom setting, showing students material culture which is reflective of their own ethnographies or ethnographies that they're less familiar with. Are these practices that happen in your studies or in your classrooms?
I think this is also a question that our two contributors online, Corey and Nurin, might be able to engage with. I can't see them if they're here, but meanwhile, yes. I'm sure there are other.
For my own research, no, I have not done anything, but at my supervisor's classes, because I observed one of her courses, which is called Material Word Making. There was a Kurdish student, and because my supervisor, what I observed from her course was letting them to material guide them to design for the collections. So she was using like different materials, for example, weaving, what I observed, to show her cultural heritage. That's what I saw in that course, and what I saw how they are using material to guide them, not just designing first and then deciding to choose which materials. And about cultural aspects, that's what I can talk about.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And in our project work is also sometimes, normally we have workshops, we have a knitting workshop and a weaving workshop and a printing workshop, as a screen printing and a dyeing workshop. And the students come from the second semester to the fourth, they come to all workshops that they can deal with all the fabrics and materials. And of course, if it fits into the project work, they try to include their heritage. Or we have one student, he had a cooperation with an artist and include his heritage. So they try to use it for experiment in the fabric. But the fabric or the materials is a good starting point to develop the design processes.
Thank you. Are there more questions? Yes? 1, 2? Excellent. Thank you. 1, 2, 3.
Who's first?
Thank you. I'm Nina. I work at the Centre for Sustainable Fashion in London. We've talked quite a bit about barriers today, whether they're legal, political, cultural, institutional. Just to kind of take this into more of a speculative space, if there was a barrier that you're currently experiencing that you could overcome, what would it be, and what would it unlock for you? Where would it take you? What is the kind of vision of education that you would really like to access that you currently feel like you can't? Sorry.
That's a beautiful question. I like the speculative space. I think one of the challenges is, and I can only talk for a US context, but I think this represents some of my experience in Canada as well. The business model of a university, right? There's this increased corporate model in which university are run, which almost can be at odds with the idea of doing social good. And so I think that is one of the main tensions of when you understand that how do you focus on like tuition dollars, bringing in like research grants, right? Scholarships and donations and funding, and working with a business model around running a university like a business, but also trying to do social good, where you're trying to intervene in the very systems of business that have created this type of injustice. How do you create business models that then support that, and what does that look like? So sometimes I think that the biggest barrier is wishing that there was really a deep social good of universities where we didn't have to follow a financial model that was so that it's increasingly coming from a corporate world that puts some of the purpose and vision at odds with making money, right? Ensuring that there's no, debt for the university, or that, so really trying to think of what does that look like. That's one of the biggest challenges, because there is this need then to think about how do we reprioritize resources, how do we shift resources so we can do this work of redistributing power. And part of the challenge is that redistribution of financial resources challenges the very essence of a corporate model that universities, I think in the global north increasingly, have really been moving towards.
Yeah, I agree, Ben. And to add on that, I would say within the context of a timeline, if I was to have an aspiration, and within a university context, that's more speculative, is to look at, for lack of a better, more corporate timeline, in that we can have a conversation, action, and it moves, and we're not in that same conversation. Because what it does is put off some of these initiatives, or it pushes them a little bit further down the line. So then when you speak about aspects of access and what that looks like, it almost seems as if it cannot be realized, because you're constantly in this loop of requesting, asking, in this business model that may not be conducive of progress or being progressive.
I think our challenge is when you have students here, as Ray said yesterday at the beginning of the conference, and we have to bring them to a sustainable thinking for fashion design. I think this is a really very big challenge to transform all the students that want to come to the fashion design practice, and they have completely different things in mind when they are coming here, or they have things in mind, and we come and want to bring them to a sustainable fashion design. I think this is really challenging to transform this. And to also focus on materials and fabrics and really try to design more with the structures of the materials and the combinations of the materials. I think this is really challenging for us.
I can talk about two challenges. Right now, when I try to implement sustainable strategies in the courses, in elective courses at Hannover, Hochschule Hannover, what I faced was the problem how to keep students motivated while you are talking about problems fashion industry is making, and how to keep them motivated and to keep them active in the next sessions. This is one challenge that I'm facing, and we are looking for a way to overcome it. But the biggest challenge is when I want to, after piloting the course here, when I want to implement it in Tehran, probably I will face some political problems, because if I go there personally and implement it, I won't be back here and I will stay there. And if I don't go there and I do it online, I will probably go in the blacklist, because my work is about deconstructing the education. That's what they don't want. They are following the traditional education that they defined it. And environment is in their power territory, so environment of Iran is their own. You can talk about it. As a member of Fashion Revolution, I think I've already been in their blacklist, but that's the biggest challenge I think I will face in my research. Yeah.
Can I just add one challenge? Sorry, I found this sorry to go in this conversation, but I have to. Ooh. Wow. No, I just wanted to add what I find also a big challenge is that students keep their passion for fashion and their love, because with all this overwhelming situations in the world, it's sometimes difficult to love clothes, and I think I found this a big challenge. Sorry.
Hello, my name is Bianca, and since I spoke about classism, I need to say I work for 5 different institutions in order to keep my things going. So it's Academy of Fine Arts Vienna, and it's the HTW Berlin, it's the GIU in Cairo, it's the HFK in Bremen, and the Burggebich in Halle. So my question is a terminology I came along when I was talking to a colleague in Cairo that actually is from the MENA region, and he told me that he was very happy to become a professor, but on the other hand, he felt like the decolonial trophy of the faculty. And I thought it was a very interesting construct in order to install change in faculties, and I basically just want to ask if some of you could relate. How do you go about this feeling, and how to kind of like stop being the de-privileged trophy or the de-colonial trophy of the faculty and kind of become a real diverse faculty? Because I think that's not so easy. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. I mean, obviously, faculty position who possibly have those sentiments were not mine, so I'm not going to speak for
I'm only speaking for myself and my own perspectives and what has been shared with me, and we highlighted this in some of our conversation. There is a tension there. There's a tension for a person who possibly comes into the space that knows that there are systemic issues and knows that in order for some things to change, there needs to be certain voices at the table in order to do so. And you want collective conversation, but you do need to have perspective share. So there needs to be a space for that, right? And if there's a space for that, you should have voices that are representing a space that you are trying to shift or trying to change. So there's that. But I'll also say that there are, colleagues who possibly wear multiple hats, and they may not necessarily, while there's those different intersections that you mentioned, they may not feel that they are one or the other, right? You're occupying both spaces. You are the space. They don't necessarily put a qualifier in front of the work that they do or how they may present. They are this person. This is their practice. This is their investment, and they're doing this work regardless of how they may identify. So there's colleagues who are in that ethos. And then one of the questions that were posed with recruitment of students and knowing that students and faculty and staff colleagues, you want a culture, most people, I would think, wants to sort of be in a space where you feel there's a belonging and a welcoming, and however you qualify that, you hope you're around people that are possibly like-minded. You also want protests and challenges as well, right? Because that's what we do as academics and as we do as scholars. So in order to have that space, there needs to be a pathway for that to happen. And you want students to be able to see people like them, staff to be able to see people like them, know that there's conversations that can be held safely in whatever spaces that these are where there is tension. And you also do want to, you can easily call out tokenism as well. You can easily, sort of see that you are here and your voice is respected, the work you do is respected around colleagues versus you're this person, we'll hire you, we'll recruit these students, and we'll make this sort of false positioning for your advice to come forward or consult to come forward, we won't action on it. So it's sort of easy to discern where the tokenism is or where you need those voices from certain individuals that can bring perspective and where those views are respected to be able to make shifts or begin to make shifts.
And I think I would add from like an institutional perspective, you need to do cluster hires. Like doing one hire and saying we've now achieved our quote, diversifying faculty, or now we have expertise in this one area that is like, here's our like dominant canon of fashion, and now we have this, has been an approach that actually can just, as Dory Tunstall has said, right, like actually create more harm. And so it's certainly in the past 2 years at Parsons, we've been very intentional in the hiring of bringing in more knowledge around social climate justice from intersectional perspectives, that we are engaging in critical mass. So we're bringing in groups of faculty who have knowledges that have been excluded from fashion education, but so it doesn't reproduce this trophy or this tokenization or this nice to have, and now we're going back to business as usual. So it's a commitment that for our hiring moving on, this is about redistributing power. This is about changing the composition and transforming the university. And so that can only be done by those more systemic commitments around cluster hiring. And so I think like that's why when there is hiring or that's with the intention of diversifying faculty, thinking about how that's actually actualized in a way to produce the desired effect versus creating more harm, not just, not for the institution, but for the individuals then who occupy those spaces.
Thank you. Yes, we have another question, I think.
Hi, I'm Philip from the University of Applied Sciences in Bielefeld, Germany. And I wanted to come back with my question to the material cultures, because for me that also implies going back to what you said about the production process, which is not really part of design education, or not, because for me that also includes the social aspect of knowing how solidarity with the people who actually bring my design into being, and I wanted you to maybe, we heard already one project that was focusing on ideas how to change that. Also, that's why I'm just curious, because we have like 3 different fashion cultures here, with being from different background. So I wanted to ask you if you have, like, are there any projects already in your schools, or how do you think about that? And maybe you can comment on that. Also, if it's already happening in Iran with fashion school, the dialogue between production and design, that would interest me.
Yes, I studied in Iran in apparel and textile design. So there are some courses for traditional embroidery and traditional fabrics, how they have been creating those fabrics or embroideries. So these are some educational courses that we had there. And as there are many embroidery techniques around, especially borders of Iran, like in each credit course, they were teaching one of those embroidery techniques or traditional fabric making. That's what I saw there. Yeah.
And we are trying in several projects in former time to include this or visit companies and fabrics in the textile chain. As there are still some in Germany, but not that much, because we always don't know where to get the money for these excursions, or because the last time I was with Valeska in Milano last year to visit the productions there and the shoe productions. So this is they're so interesting. The students, it is really important that they get this insight to the companies where they will be producing in the future, and also get the contacts. So, but I think we have to focus more on that, because otherwise we cannot change to a sustainable fashion industry.
Yes, we have materiality, connections with partnerships, fashion production, embedded across several of our core curricular courses within the School of Fashion, in addition to our elective space, and alongside those in-class curricular engagements, to have an understanding, connecting of how where the industry is, the reality of the industry, or lack thereof, or where their structural fashion systems may need to shift. We also have engagements with industry partners. There's students have opportunities to have either the design competitions or engagements to make those connections that are more industry facing. So there's a theory and concept, and some in the speculative space that was sort of asked here, but also having a real industry connection across our various programs. So it manifests in different ways within the School of Fashion. We also have minors that are set in like the fashion business space, the fashion communication space, where a student can also choose to have a focus of this, to having more engagements of connecting across different fashion practices and understanding where that make and production, who the partners are in that space, how to partner in that space, how to engage in that space, and how to be part of the thinkers and the change makers in that space, in those spaces.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? If there, one, and then I suggest that what we do for the last 10 minutes is become a more informal conversation, so that we can kind of relax and interact a little bit more, so across the panel. So we'll have one more question, and then we'll have 10 minutes of interaction, and I can ask a question then. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for your interventions. My question is related to all your different institutions, and so, okay, I will ask, how do you deal with how do you deal with the fact that sometimes students enter the fashion school space with some expectation of getting a job anywhere, and then often schools, fashion schools, also are ranked depending on the percentage of acceptation within firms and companies and big names and of the industry and so on. So how do you deal with this shift towards a practice that is different than it used to be, where we would praise students that actually get a job at Dior or Chanel or Calvin Klein? Or I think you understand.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, I think in many ways, first it's about broadening the definition of success, right? Success is not only being a creative director of X brand, right? Success can mean a plurality of different careers within the plurality of the fashion space. And it's our role and responsibility as educators to not only teach students about those plurality of changing careers that exist, but to value those within how we teach and how we profile alumni and how we think about success. So, right, there's a responsibility that there's not one path to success, there's multiple. And I can certainly say that within Parsons, we're not anti-capital F fashion, right? We have a deep engagement with industry, but not necessarily to accept what is, but with the expectation that we can work in collaboration to shift with and in partnership with industry to what it should be. And I think that's really important because all of us as fashion educators work within capital F fashion in some way, right? We're all engaged in particular ways within that, quote, dominant industrial industry. And so how do we want to engage, right? We can engage in critical ways, but in ways for us that foster dialogue, that foster conversation, that foster partnership, because by doing that, we can shift the current practices that cause harm. And also with the understanding that most of our students in a capitalist model will go on to work in capital F fashion, and we want to prepare them for those careers in order to support that change. And so for us, it's certainly coming in and acknowledging students' love of fashion that brought them to fashion school in the first place, acknowledging our love of fashion as educators that brought us into these fields, and to thinking critically about how do we want to foster partnerships and collaboration and conversation with industry that allows those dialogues to happen and that change to happen. And at the same time, recognizing there's a plurality of fashion systems and providing like pathways for students depending on their own desires and interests to move into those spaces. So I think it's not like an anti-capital F fashion. It's a way to say, no, we want to critically and consciously engage because that is our responsibility to our students who will, many of them work in those fields, but with the desire to shift the way it's created harm.
I think it is very important to teach the students with a very big focus on their expertise, that they can be specialists in a specific field in the end, that maybe they have a special focus on knitwear or on print design or whatever, and bring them really very early together with the industry, also bringing them in contact with the technology part and the material part. And then the field is really wide open, so for them. But I know, or I see it also with our students, not all of them work in the capital F fashion in the end, of course. They try to make their own labels or whatever. And that's definitely not so easy when you're not prepared for this after the 4 years as a bachelor student. So I think it's very important to help them to specialize during the 4 years.
Okay, well, we can have a few minutes of conversation, and I would like to ask the panel a question that is really about community and space, trying to tie things up. And as I think you said, Ben, you know, the neoliberal university has deeply invested in a kind of branding strategy to make itself exceptional, to make itself like a big corporation. And that's clearly happened in London with Central St. Martin's and the London College of Fashion, with the repercussion that in effect almost to, and this is completely within the logic of neoliberalism, that to do fashion, you have to have on your CV Central St. Martin's. It's become a kind of passport into, or at least that's the assumption. Now, to me, this is one of the most pernicious aspects of the neoliberal university, because in my social democratic times, it used to be completely possible to be a graduate from Middlesex University, from Liverpool Polytechnic, from Dundee Polytechnic, and the talent that came out of these other institutions was sensational. But the competitive ethos of neoliberalism has had this impact on a younger generation. Oh, it only counts if I get into London College of Fashion or Central St. Martin's. Now, what that in it does is that it exacerbates inequality, because it means that you have to be exceptional to be able to try and get in. And it also creates much bigger and unsurmountable boundaries for disadvantaged people. For example, a single mum in Liverpool, how can that person ever, or age 19 or 20, how can they possibly not only get to London, get into Central St. Martin's, but then afford the luxury student accommodation that surrounds these campuses now? You know, the concept of luxury student accommodation has now become a kind of everyday expectation, that you have a gym and a swimming pool and that you pay £300 a week for a tiny room. So my point is, should not these universities that are well endowed, like Central St. Martin's or like the New School, shouldn't they be developing community strategies, outreach, satellite campuses? Now, I know at Glasgow University, this has been one of their strategies, is to develop learning hubs and diploma access in very poor parts of Scotland, not just Glasgow. So it would seem to me that we have to do so much more to challenge these kind of super brands that have emerged and impose themselves on our university experience and break that down. And I'm wondering if you can think of ways in which this might, a kind of community ethos that is also one that has got a strong social justice for diverse populations. Of course, not only people that have been in prison, but people that are homeless, disadvantaged, care leavers, and so on, single parents, both here in Germany, in the UK, and in the US. So that would be my kind of point to you: space and community and affordable housing while you're studying.
That we also feel sometimes that the young people are afraid coming to the University of the Arts here to Berlin, because probably they will not get into it. But what we try to do over the last years to go into the schools and talk to the young people there, or bring them here, that they work here 1 week with us and prepare something what they can do in 1 week. They go to the workshops here and can feel the university a bit, and then maybe they are not so afraid for applying. So this is what we try to do, and but it's really difficult to reach all of them.
I mean, even out in Brandenburg, I'm sure it's difficult to get kids from further out into central Berlin.
Yes, of course, but we try to do it in a bigger scale with the schools, because I think this is really a good system to go into the schools, talk about what you're doing, because they have a completely other vision about fashion. They are all more in fast fashion, almost, so there is the change extremely to bring them down to the fashion industry as it is, and then especially for the sustainable aspect. I think it's very complicated, but Yeah, this has also very much to do with financial hurdles, because the university structure said we are not the people, or we are not the institution to solve the problem what the schools didn't get. So we are not, we cannot do it with you. So we have to focus on just a few schools, but it could be much bigger. This,
yeah. Thank you, Magdalena.
I mean, I think I'll say from sort of our perspective at Parsons, and first, like, I think that there's perhaps an expectation or assumption that, like, the new school or Parsons is a very wealthy school with a huge endowment. It's not. You know, we're a small university and a small art and design school working on a limited budget, and really trying to make it work to best support our community. But for many, many years, Parsons has first thought about access by thinking about its location. So we're located in New York City. What is our responsibility to engage with the local community? And so we have a program called the Parsons Scholars Program that's specifically for disadvantaged high school students in their final years of high school. For 2 years, they can come to Parsons every weekend to study art and design, recognizing that they may not have access to the same education in the schools and in the communities where they are. It's often very expensive to take this, so we offer that for free. We pay for their lunches, we pay for their subway, we support them, and we support them in developing portfolio, teaching them really how do you develop a portfolio to apply to any art and design school, whether it's Parsons or somewhere else, so they're best prepared for success. How do you prepare scholarship applications? So our focus being, you know, small art and design school has been how do we first think about the community we're in and supporting that local community with local high school students who are disadvantaged. That's been key. And then I think the second thing that we're increasingly doing now is thinking we're on indigenous land in North America. How do we think about supporting the local indigenous communities in collaboration, in scholarships, in students? What does that look like in teaching? So thinking first about the community and then the deeper history when we think about relationships. But I think in many ways that begins by thinking of place and the land and location and context in which the fashion school is on and the histories that have created types of inequity and how we can redress that.
Thank you, Ben. And to add on a programmatic level, we have presented in the past and have launched programs that have low residency models, mostly in the graduate space or the career changing space, so that colleagues and students may, you know, have dual modality. They may be studying online for a period of time and they're coming to campus once a month or twice a month for a cluster of classes so that they can interact with their cohort in set program and also interact with the faculty who are in those spaces as well. That's across the new school of which Parsons is housed. But we also have a program in a department in the new school, the School for Public Engagement, SPE, that also has and it speaks to the model, this speaks to the question of individuals who have families, who are caregivers, right? They may have some education outside and they need to finish their career. So we have a program, it's BPATS, and it is for individuals just as that, where they have education in different pockets, they want to finish in a programming, and that space is also curated for that person, you know, curated for that type of student. So the new school is very conscious. Again, the new school of which Parsons is housed is very conscious. There are different types of learners and academics, whether you are a student engaging or whether you are a faculty or colleague or a partner engaging with our students and with our community. So we still need to do more of it, but we do have some models and structures in place to support that level of engagement.
Fantastic. Are there any other, would you like to say any final words across the panel? I think we've lost, sadly, our other two contributors.
I mean, I'm excited for what the panel would bring and for the conference brings around the relationship between climate and social justice, right? I think often we have separated these in a binary and not necessarily understood the interrelationship. And I think that that is truly an important conversation when we think about access in fast fashion, when we think about not just production of clothes, but like secondhand clothing and mending. I think really thinking about the ways, I think in a lot of our work, like how intersectionality can inform an understanding, but I think bringing the conversations together is really important. And I think even after this panel, there's lots of opportunities in the informal spaces to be able to do that.
Yes. Are there any other comments? No? Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you to our wonderful speakers. Thank you also to the organizers and the tech.
Thank you as well for your presentation. Thank you.
Fantastic. Hello. Every contribution was